Tonight on NewsWatch, Christians under fire. Why Islamists have launched a wave of attacks in Egypt.
Plus, helping gay people find new hope in Christ. Why the founder of Exodus International is calling for a change.
And the 200-year impact of Adoniram Judson. We'll show you how this missionary pioneer reached an unreached people. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin.
And I'm Wendy Griffith.
Egyptian Christians are facing growing retaliation for opposing President Mohamed Morsi. His supporters say Christian leaders were behind his removal from office. Christians have had their homes burned and some have even been killed. George Thomas has more in our top story tonight.
Supporters of ousted Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi are angry, and the brunt of that anger is being directed at the country's Christian minority.
The Christians have been very visible in the anti-Brotherhood, anti-Morsi protests so far, and this high visibility has angered a lot of Islamists, whether from the Brotherhood or from other Islamist movements.
On Thursday, the body of a Christian merchant was found decapitated in a cemetery. Last Saturday, a Coptic Christian priest was shot by gunmen in an outdoor market. And days after the military coup that removed Morsi from office, Muslim extremists in southern Egypt burned dozens of Christian homes and stabbed 4 believers to death.
It's part of the Brotherhood's mobilization that they are targeting Christians, that they are renouncing them as behind this. If the Brotherhood is able to portray what happened as a Christian-dominated or Christian-driven protest, then they get to gain massive support in the streets.
The former Pope of Egypt's Coptic Christian community encouraged believers to stay out of the public eye and politics for fear of backlash. But the community's new Pope openly supported the removal of Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood from office.
In a sense, the Coptic Pope's participation in the military's meeting with figures from the Egyptian society will neither be forgotten nor will it be forgiven.
Meanwhile, Egypt's new military-backed government ordered the arrest of the Muslim Brotherhood's spiritual leader and 9 others. They're suspected of instigating violence outside the Republican Guard building in Cairo this week. U.S. officials have shown satisfaction with the new government's plan to reinstate democratically elected leaders. And on Thursday, defense officials announced that U.S. aid to Egypt would continue with a delivery of F-16 fighter jets in coming weeks. Officially, though, the Obama administration is choosing to remain neutral in the crisis. George Thomas, CBN News.
Thanks, George. Egypt's second revolution was spawned in part by a dismal economy under former President Mohamed Morsi. Now that Morsi is gone, many Egyptians are hoping their economy will bounce back. Here's Chris Mitchell from the Great Pyramids in Cairo.
When millions of Egyptians took to the streets, many complained of economic hardships under President Morsi.
The electricity was often going off, no benzene, no solar. And the life of the Egyptians became very difficult.
Perhaps the hardest hit sector of Egypt's economy has been its tourism industry. After Egypt's first revolution in 2011, the tourism industry was devastated. Not many tourists came to see the pyramids or the Sphinx. The hope for many Egyptians is that after the second revolution, they'll come back. During Egypt's first revolution that deposed Mubarak, many of the tour guides from the pyramids rode into Tahrir Square to protest. They said the revolution was driving away business. Since then, most tourists have stayed away.
Since the first revolution, 2011, the business is very bad. There is no tourists at all, just very few. 80% from the tourism is down. For example, I used to make a tour trip every day at the pyramid area. Right now, I just make one tour every couple of days.
Michael has been a tour guide at Egypt's Great Pyramids for more than 20 years.
You know, the people don't want to come here because they are not feel safe. When the people feel safe, many people want to come see the pyramid. This is one of the 7 wonders. And we used to have thousands of people here. So I think it will take a time. People will start to come back again.
It's a hope shared by many Egyptians.
I will ask all the viewers to pray for us. And I will tell them to flourish our economy by visiting Egypt and sending many tourists as they can.
Michael hopes they come back to one of the 7 wonders of the world.
I want to tell the people on all over the world, come to see our place. It's a very good place and it's very safe and no problem. And Egypt people are very good. And I want to tell all the Americans, please come here because you are the best. This is true, it's not compliment. I hope American people come here a lot.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, the Great Pyramids, Cairo, Egypt.
In other news, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano is resigning. In a statement today, Napolitano said she's stepping down to take a job running the University of California education system. Napolitano led the Department of Homeland Security throughout President Obama's first term. She is notorious for a memo in which she warned the government to be on the lookout for right-wing extremism. Napolitano speculated that some military veterans and other conservatives like pro-lifers could be turning into dangerous radicals.
Could Big Brother use your DNA to track you? Countries are building DNA databases to fight crime and terrorism, but experts worry that genetic information could be misused. At least 54 countries have national police databases filled with millions of DNA samples. The U.S. has the biggest DNA database with information on 11 million people suspected of convicted of crimes. The police can collect DNA from anyone who's been arrested, but experts say DNA can also be used to track people's movements, find out their medical history and psychological profile.
Pennsylvania's Attorney General says she will not defend the state's law that protects traditional marriage. Gay activists are suing to overturn that law. It's the Attorney General's duty to defend state laws, but Kathleen Kane says she's choosing to, quote, end another wave of discrimination.
It is exciting. I think it's very historic. The fact that we are breaking down yet another wave of inequality or discrimination is a good day.
It's now up to the governor's lawyer to uphold the state's Defense of Marriage Act, also known as DOMA. Those who believe marriage is between one man and one woman are concerned that judges and lawsuits are circumventing the will of the people.
When people have had the opportunity to vote at the ballot box about whether marriage should remain as it has always been, the union of one man and one woman, that's what the people want. And we think the people should have a voice.
I agree. Well, 23 plaintiffs are suing the state, including 10 gay and lesbian couples.
Well, a Texas-sized showdown over abortion has captured the nation's attention. The state Senate is expected to vote on a bill today that would outlaw late-term abortion. Heather Sells has the latest from the Lone Star State and another heated battle on abortion in North Carolina.
It's been 2 weeks since Texas Democrats blocked the late-term abortion bill with a last-minute filibuster and a loud audience protest. But today, momentum is clearly on the pro-life side. Former Senator and outspoken pro-lifer Rick Santorum visited the Capitol this week.
What they're doing here today is simply human decency. Human decency for the little child in the womb.
On Wednesday, a large majority of the Texas House passed the bill.
It was a really strong vote, 98 to 49, and it's a good thing.
The bill bans abortions after 20 weeks, the point at which unborn babies can feel pain. It also limits when and where women can take abortion pills, and it allows abortions only in surgical centers.
This is slowly eroding the rights of women.
Abortion backers say the bill would shut down abortion clinics that can't afford to upgrade into surgical centers. But pro-lifers say the life of the child and safe medical care for women are more important.
I'm here to help save some babies.
The lieutenant governor had extra police on hand for today's vote, worried that abortion supporters will disrupt proceedings like they have recently.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
It's a high-stakes battle simply because Texas is the second largest state in the country. Other states have passed similar legislation, but if it passes here, it will prove a major victory for pro-lifers. Meanwhile, a heated debate in North Carolina as well.
I know that there's great emotion on both sides of this issue. The gallery will be cleared to the right.
The House there has approved new rules for abortion clinics, and the Senate is now considering them. Opponents in North Carolina are also arguing that the bill will end up closing clinics.
We are not out here trying to shut down, the word's been shut down every abortion clinic in North Carolina except one.
Pro-lifers say the bill is about women's health. They point to the safety record of abortion clinics in North Carolina. In the last 10 years, they've been cited over 200 times. Heather Sells, CBN News.
It's unclear if North Carolina's governor will sign the bill, but in Texas, the governor has promised to sign it. And to follow the Senate vote there, just go to cbnnews.com.
The Supreme Court of Illinois has upheld a law requiring doctors notify parents of underage girls seeking an abortion. The law first passed in the state in 1995, but never took effect. The decision clears the way for the state to enforce it after 2 decades of court battles. It states that a parent or guardian would have to be notified at least 48 hours before an abortion is performed on a minor. The Thomas More Society defended the law, arguing that it's constitutional and that other states have upheld similar laws.
If you ask the parent of a 13-year-old, hey, would you want your daughter being taken for an abortion without you knowing? They're going to say no. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, this common sense measure makes sense.
The law goes into effect in 35 days.
Liberty University's attempt to overturn Obamacare is rejected by an appeals court. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a lower court's ruling dismissing the suit. Liberty argued the health care law is unconstitutional because it forces religious employers to provide coverage for abortion-inducing drugs. Liberty attorney Matt Staver says he will take the case to the Supreme Court.
A new bill introduced Thursday would forbid the federal government from withholding funds from groups that engage in voluntary religious activity. It's called the Freedom to Pray Act. Democratic Senator Mary Landrieu says she began working on the legislation after she heard of a Young Marines program that could lose its federal money, all because there was voluntary prayer and the mention of God. Disturbing.
Coming up, 200 years later, remembering a founding father of the modern missions movement. We visit the place where he translated the Bible and introduced a people to Jesus.
Welcome back. Since the church's founding, Christians have risked their lives to share the good news. And this weekend marks the 200th anniversary of one American's mission to plant the church in Burma, also known as Myanmar.
Adoniram Judson first set foot in the Asian nation 196 years ago. His ministry was the fulfillment of prophecy, and he left an amazing Christian legacy not only for Burma, but the world. Gary Lane has the story from Mandalay.
Folklore of Burma's ethnic Karen tells of a golden book given to them by God. The book was either lost or destroyed, but prophecy foretold of a day in the future when a white brother would come and reunite them with a copy of the book and the one true God. That prophecy was fulfilled July 13, 1813, when American Baptist missionary Adoniram Judson and his wife Anne arrived in Rangoon. The Buddhists and animists of Burma resisted the gospel. Judson didn't win his first convert until 6 years later. Pastor Mong of the Judson Baptist Church of Ong Pinlay explains why.
Most people feared losing their jobs, and they were not willing to get away from the Buddhist and cultural tradition. They didn't want to abandon their deeply rooted traditions.
Judson was jailed in June 1824 after war broke out between Burma and Britain. He was confined to a prison that used to stand on this site in Ava. An ancient guard tower still overlooks the area. Judson and other foreigners were held captive in shackles, suspected of spying for the British. Judson wrote about his prison sufferings, saying he would gladly consign them to oblivion.
Burmese Christians built a monument right here. It stood about this high. It was to commemorate the time that Judson spent in prison. This was the site of his first imprisonment. But in the early 1990s, government officials tore it down.
But throughout the years, numerous Burmese governments, including the current military regime, have failed to stop the advancement of Christianity and Judson's legacy.
Judson endured a grueling 6-month journey after being released from the first prison. He was brought to the second prison on this site here in Mandalay. Today, it is home to the Judson Baptist Church.
Judson was held captive for a total of 21 months. Perhaps his greatest accomplishment after his release was translating the first Burmese language Bible. Initial copies were printed in October 1840. One is housed here in Ong Pinlay at the Judson Baptist Church. Pastor Mong is determined to see that Judson's legacy lives on.
We need to know and understand the life of Judson and how he persevered because of the gospel. And secondly, we need to learn from him the way he lived, the way he shared the gospel. Please pray that we should lead the way, and please pray for this church also. It has a good legacy in the history of Burmese Christians and those who are doing ministry around the remote area of the country. Pray for them too.
Evangelists working to assure that seeds planted by Judson nearly 200 years ago continue growing and bearing fruit for generations to come. Gary Lane, CBN News, Mandalay, Burma.
Up next, the real reason why the nation's flagship ministry to homosexuals shut its doors. Hear from the former president of Exodus International.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes now.
Well, to the surprise of many, Exodus International recently announced it was closing down. For years, it had been the flagship ministry for people who wanted to leave homosexuality.
Heather Sells sat down with Exodus President Alan Chambers to find out what happened and what's next.
After 37 years in ministry to those struggling with same-sex attraction, the closing of Exodus caught many off guard. But President Alan Chambers says the time was right.
Part of our decision was we're going out of business so the church can do its job.
And, says Chambers, after decades of taking the heat on the gay issue, Exodus removing itself as a target made sense.
It's too much for any one person or any one organization to bear, to be the entity that owns really the religious or the Christian response to this issue.
Critics like Peter Sprigg of the Family Research Council also believe shutting down was a good idea, but for a different reason. Sprigg says Exodus had bewildered many as it backed away from its original focus on change.
It had reached the point of generating a certain amount of confusion within the Christian community and the ex-gay movement. And now we're able to focus on the continuing message of the ex-gay movement that change is possible.
Sprigg also disagrees with Chambers' recent apologies to those who've been hurt by Exodus. Chambers issued a public statement and went on the Oprah Winfrey Network to say he's sorry.
Never in a million years would I intentionally hurt another person. Yet here I sit, having hurt many by failing to acknowledge the pain that people affiliated with Exodus experienced, and by failing to share the whole truth about my own story.
I don't think anyone in the ex-gay movement as a whole has anything to apologize for. The overall message of the ex-gay movement has been change is possible. That's a very modest statement.
But Chambers says he feels compelled to apologize. He says he still holds to a biblical worldview that God created sex for men and women within the bonds of marriage. But for many, he says, same-sex attraction will always be a struggle. It is for him, he says, even after 16 years of marriage. What he regrets, that Exodus led many to believe they could significantly change their desires.
I wish we'd been a whole lot more honest. I wish we had shared the depth and the complexity of our stories, that I follow Christ in the midst of the reality that I live in, that I have an amazing marriage, even in the reality of temptations and struggles and attractions that are still there. And I think we've tried far too often to minimize that discussion, and it's hurt people in the process.
Psychologist Mark Yarhouse's 2007 study on change and orientation is one of the most highly regarded to date. And while it supports the possibility, it also underscores Chambers' message that not all who want to change are able.
It's always difficult to talk about change because the average person just hearing that will think, is it possible to change? And they'll think in their mind a categorical shift or change from completely gay to completely straight. And I don't think that's particularly likely. That's not what our data showed.
The church's challenge, says Yarhouse, to not only minister to those who want to change their same-sex attraction, but to walk with those who find it a lifelong struggle.
What could be the benefit just for the church saying, let's focus in on helping someone in their relationship with God, cultivate their relationship with Christ. We don't know whether their attractions will change over time.
Right now, only a remnant remain at the old Exodus offices here in Orlando. But its leaders hope that the so-called death of this organization results in the birth of a new movement that starts a fresh conversation about faith and sexuality.
It's a brand new organization with no support at this point, no funding, no nothing, and yet I'm more excited than I am anything.
In the meantime, a new umbrella group, Restored Hope Network, is seeking to serve the original mission of Exodus by focusing on change for those who want it. For many in the church, it's a time to recover after a tumultuous spring. Between the Boy Scout decision, Exodus closing, and the Supreme Court rulings, many who support traditional marriage have felt overwhelmed. But for Chambers, despite an empty building and a dream that has died, it's the perfect time to start over and engage a country that's perhaps more divided than ever. Reporting in Orlando, Heather Sells, CBN News.
A mother finds comfort in the aftermath of a storm.
Superstorm Sandy washed ashore a message in a bottle from her deceased daughter.
She felt very free there. She was happy and free, and she had her own identity. Every time I do something, I wonder, like, what would she say?
In April 2010, Mimi got a call from her daughter's school in Switzerland. 18-year-old Sidoni had accidentally fallen off a cliff and died. But recently, Mimi received an unexpected message. This past December, workers cleaning up after Sandy found a message in a bottle. The fated message was from Sidoni.
Excellent yourself, dude. If you get this, call this number.
Mimi believes her daughter wrote it when she was just 10 years old. At that time, Sidoni was with a friend in New York. What a gift.
Yeah.
Just to have a little tiny note like that.
Definitely. Yes.
Well, we're all out of time. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, we'll see you later.